Today I'm going to show you how I do a tail mount. So we're just going to fan this out, but we need to get this cleaned up and get it taken care of. So I'm going to show you my process. You've seen on some of our other videos how we cut this off of the bird. It's pretty simple. This is the actual tail bone where it goes up inside those quills. I'm going to show you how to get all this out. Let's turn this into a tail mount. The first step I do is to take these back feathers off. So I use a razor blade, or if you've got a good sharp knife, this happens to be an Outdoor Edge, the Razor Blaze. Good knife, you can replace this blade here. Makes it pretty simple. But most of the time you'll see me use razor blades just because I can throw them away. They're cheap. You can get them at Home Depot or Lowe's or somewhere. Move those out of the way where maybe you can see a little bit better. I cut them almost flat. You almost want this razor blade sitting flat with the quills so you can slide it in right down. You're not wanting to cut through these quills, you're wanting to cut right over top of them. So you're not wanting to cut down this way, you're wanting to go at a real sharp angle like that. So you can see here, just taking that, cutting it at an angle. And right here in this center is where that bone is going to be, the tail bone. That's where you need to pop that out. So I just work this down to that center point, which would be, say, where these center set of quills are. Just work it down to that. Once I get that, you can see all that's fleshed, nothing but fat left. Now I'm going to flip this over. Now when I come on the front side, most of the time I don't leave very many feathers. I like the look of just your secondaries and your primaries more than I do these back feathers here. So sometimes I'll cut this off flush right here, but I know a lot of people don't do it that way, so I'll show you how you do it, leaving some of these back feathers on. If you can see, that is actually one of their oil glands. That is where they preen that and then preen their feathers to get that oil on there. When they're alive, that's great, but after they've died, we don't want that on there anymore. So you can cut that out on the front side just to get that oil gland off. You see, you take it out, and then from the underside, I'll show you here, we're going to take that all the way out. So you're going to roll these feathers back, what you're wanting to keep. All these down feathers, they can come out. They're not going to be seen anyway, no matter what you plan on doing with it. But again, take this razor blade or knife, whatever you like using, and you're just going to cut across to keep these feathers attached to the skin. Anywhere there's not feathers attached to the skin, you don't need it. So not sure if you can see this, but right here, this is skin, but there's actually no feathers, no quills that are attached to that. So I don't need this skin. So I'm just going to cut straight across it to get that meat separated off. Same thing on the other side. Gonna separate it off. And now once you get this skint back, you're going to do that same thing that I had just talked about by laying the blade flat and cutting across the top of those quills. Same thing on this side. You can see, again, getting down to that center point there. When you get here, if you've skint that down the right way, you should be able to grab, put pressure. So you're going to put pressure here, and you're going to want to push down, and you'll feel it start to separate. If you notice the quills coming with it, you need to cut it a little bit more. But when you do that, you'll feel that. There's your bone right there. So that is the actual tailbone there that went up into those feathers. I like to remove that. It makes these feathers, seems like it makes them a lot more free. So all this is scrap. Now, the other part to this is to show you where we removed that oil gland. That's gonna be, there's actually like 2 sacks. So it'll be right there and right there. If you take a knife or razor blade, whatever, and you cut across the top of that, you'll see it opens up. And those are your oil glands. So you can see like right there, that is actually part of the dried up oil that was gonna come out for this bird to preen with. So to me, you don't want that grease and stuff coming out onto your feathers. So you wanna open that up, and if you can, cut that off. To where now, when we put that dry preservative in there, it'll dry that up. Any oil that was in there, it'll dry it up. You can see I've got a little meat left here. I actually have a fleshing wheel that I'll run this on. Most of y'all aren't gonna have a fleshing wheel if you're just doing a turkey tail. So you can just take this, again, blade, and just go flat down with those quills, and that stuff it'll loosen off. You can even take and go in between these quills some, like that, to separate those quills from the fat, so that your borax or dry preserve or salt or whatever you're using can get down in there, like so. And if you had any on the back, you can do the same thing. So now that you've got all that done, like I said, I use dry preserve. It's more of a powder, but borax and salt, you're gonna do the same thing. All you're wanting to do is dry all the moisture out of that. So you're gonna rub that, make sure you get it in, get it into the meat and fat and whatever's left in there, as much as you can, so it'll dry out good. Once you do that, it kind of takes a little bit of that slime away from it, so you can go back through there and touch up any spots that it looks like you might have missed. Any of the spots that you can't get some of that meat and fat and stuff off, you can just run the blade across the top of it, and that'll kind of score it and allow that preserve and stuff, salt, borax, whatever you're using, it'll kind of allow that to get down in there, soak in real good, and dry it out, I mean. So anyway, that's basically what we were looking for. Everything's cleaned off. We'll move this out of the way, and I'm going to show you my process of getting these feathers. And there's a bunch of different ways to do this. Some people use cardboard and pins and stuff of that nature. I like to do it this way. It's my preferred way of doing it. There's a million different ways that you can do it. Some people talk about pulling the feathers. Some people talk about using a board with nails. I prefer to use painter's tape, fan it out, and put that on there. It's just easiest for me. I can stack them on top of each other. I don't have to worry about it. So on this first, your back feathers, which are your primaries, they shingle. The bottom one is the furthest to the back, and every one over top of it lays over top. Now when you get to these secondaries, it's the opposite. The first one is the closest to the front, is the exterior feather, I guess you would say, and then they shingle underneath it. So you want to make sure every one of them shingles the right way, so that you get a good even look to it. And if these tail feathers are, like, if they get wet from rain or something like that, I'll do a video on that to show the best way to get that fluff back out. I've had a lot of people ask me about things like that, if they're bloody, if they're dirty, if they get rained on, wet, whatever, kind of how to do that. It's tough getting them back the way they were when they were dry, but it is achievable. So what I'm going to do is hold pressure down on this, and then I'm going to start my painter's tape. Get it? Each one of these feathers shingled out as much as you want. Some people shingle them too much. They'll put gaps in them like that. I think that looks bad. And some people draw them up too much so that your tail fan has more of a V. I want mine to be flat across the bottom. Some birds won't do it. Some birds just don't have a full enough fan, but most of them do, and most of them will. So we'll see how this one turns out. I haven't fanned this one out yet, so I don't know if it'll make the full. I mean, some birds that I've killed will even, they'll actually kind of downward angle if you fan them all the way out. Some birds just have bigger tail fans than others. But I'll go up, let's see there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I grabbed 6 on that one. There's not a math to it. I try and get it, you know, obviously you gotta angle this tape. If you start out going straight, you're gonna come off the ends. I try not to get this tape on the end of these feathers. I wanna keep it more to the base, but I don't wanna get it in the way of these because I don't want these to move when I pull that tape off. So just go up a certain distance. And one thing I'll do too is, you know, I'm wanting that flat line. So here I would take a piece of tape and make sure it hits that piece of tape. Go ahead and get it on a flat line and tape it down to the table. And then that way, when you fan this across, you can kind of push up in the middle and put some weight on it, and it'll keep any divots from getting in this tape. So now here, we're gonna jump to this side. Same thing. I like to take this feather and lay it right where there's not, there you've got a gap here. You can see that gap. I want it to be where there is no gap, but it's not overlapping too much. So about right there is where I like it. So I'll tape that, do the same thing, go through here. Being that we've got both sides kind of somewhat done, I can look at this and see that's going to be a pretty flat baseline down here. So I'll go ahead and tape that down. Now we need to link these two together. This wind is brutal today. We never have wind until I'm trying to film something. And these are kind of like shingles. These are your two ridge caps, whatever you want to call it, right there. These happen to have some white in them. Not all of them do. A lot of them don't, actually. But these happen to. So now you've got that to where that fan is flat line across the bottom. It's shingled out. The spacing is the same. Now you want to come in and do, you want to hit these secondaries. So again, like I said, this one will be the top, where on this one it's the bottom, and then they shingle over top. What I try and do on these, instead of doing it like those one by one, I try and fan these out now that I've got that fan full, and I will basically just try and get this pretty close all at one time. That wind is making it tough. Should have done this inside. But typically without the wind, I can get this pretty close to where I want it without having to do every single one of them. And then I'll just take, oh, come on. I will just take a piece of tape. This wind is just like that. go over top of it, straight down. And I put one piece here. And I put one piece here. And then I take these, your back feathers, if there's any bad ones in here, bent ones, ones that's got bad holes or anything in it, I'll pull them out. You don't have to have all of them. You can kind of make these lay how you want. But depending on what you're going to do with this tail, a lot of people don't weight it down. But depending on what you're going to do with it, what it's going in, some of the pieces that you buy, their cutout is real thin. So what I like to do is put weight on top of this. I'll take magazines or something like that and set on top of this to hold this tail fan down flat and to get it where it'll fit in that piece better whenever that piece comes in, or if you're gonna make one of your own, whatever. But that's what I like to do. So here I'll just use a cedar board that I've milled on my sawmill and just lay it over top of it like so, and then I'll just put the weight of this paint bucket down on top of it, and that'll flatten it out good. And that's it. That's all you gotta do. Pretty easy. Anybody can do it. You don't have to take this to a taxidermist. You can if you want, but everybody can do it themselves. And like I said, this was a dry, pretty fan, wasn't messed up. I'll try and do a video on one that's wet, muddy, because we've all killed a turkey. If you kill more than one turkey, it seems like everybody's killed one in the wet, and they always look horrible, look like a rat. So I'll do a video on that, showing y'all kind of how I try and fluff a wet tail back up using a shop vac. Appreciate y'all watching. Be sure and subscribe.